Greetings, students. We meet once again. Today we're going to be looking at the other half of all of the factors that led, or many of the factors that led to the American Revolution. The title of your notes today is going to be The Making of a Revolution 2. Make sure you title it at that. Make sure that's visible on the top of the page. All right. So let's get into these notes in the interest of time, because time, of course, is of the essence. So we left off last time talking about the Boston Tea Party. We know that the Boston Tea Party resulted in the destruction of tons of tea that was thrown into the Boston Harbor. What we don't know, what we didn't discuss last time, was how the British government responded to this act. So let's take a look at that. King George and the British Parliament punished the colonies by the following measures. He closed the Boston Harbor with the intention to prevent any trade or any money being made off of anything, any trade going in and out of that harbor by the Americans. His attitude, or the British attitude, was if we can't make money here, then no one will. Second, they introduced the Quartering Act. The Quartering Act was a law that was established which required that British soldiers would receive housing and food on the behalf of the American colonists. And then finally, the British General Thomas Gage became the governor of Massachusetts. All of these served as a way for Britain to maintain its control over the American colonies. And it was no more than that. King George wanted to show the Americans that he was boss. Naturally, the Americans were not going to just sit by idly and let all of these things happen. So they formed what we know as the Continental Congress, which basically consisted of people from all around the colonies, of delegates from all around the colonies. And when they came together the first time in 1774, they established a basic foundation, a basic principle, a basic understanding that they wanted to get across to all Americans and all colonists. They said that if Britain uses force against colonies, we'll use force in return. But if they don't, then we won't use force at all. And they left it at that. The discussion of revolution or reconciliation didn't come up until much later, actually a year later. We see in 1775 that the delegates debated over the idea of having a revolution against Britain or making reconciliation, making peace with Britain. And we're going to see what came out of that. However, there are certain things that the Americans did establish. One of the things that they established was that they said that they would recognize the Minutemen as the Continental Army. The Minutemen were men from around the colonies that armed themselves to fight against the British if the British happened to declare war on the colonies, or if there were any skirmishes between the colonial men and the British soldiers. Also, the Continental Congress of 1775, they appointed George Washington as the colonial governor and the general of the Continental Army. And then finally, they printed a colonial currency. This currency would be separate from the currency established by Great Britain. And therefore, Britain saw this as a great disrespect to them. And it's vowed not to make any peace with the Americans. As a last attempt to make peace, the Americans sent to the King of Britain, King George, a petition which asked for peace. This was known as the Olive Branch Petition. The Continental Congress sent the Olive Branch Petition to King George. The king rejected the petition, and he said that he would declare war on the colonies. The king's sole purpose in doing this was to show them for good, for once and for all, that he is boss. Again, a lot of this had to do with ego. But even more important than ego was money. There was a lot of money at stake here. There was great wealth, vast amounts of wealth that was at stake here. So he said we're going to go to war with the sole intention to keep America under British control. However, there was another document written a little later by a man named Thomas Paine. This document was called, or this pamphlet rather, was called Common Sense. Paine played a major role in the convincing of colonists that revolution was the only course of action left to take. He had argued that a revolution would do two things. It would allow America to trade with other nations, which means that America would get better deals from their trades. They're not locked into certain fixed prices. And then it would give Americans the chance to rebuild their society the way they felt it should be built, off of quote-unquote democratic principles. The common sense and the rejection of the Olive Branch Petition were major causes for the colonists supporting revolution. And while many colonists found themselves split between being loyal and others being revolutionary or patriotic, eventually the country did go to war with Britain. And we're going to cover what happened next at a later date. Thank you guys.